The frozen wasteland stretched endlessly, a barren battlefield painted in hues of white and gray. Sergeant Alex Carter adjusted the scope of his sniper rifle, his gloved fingers steady despite the biting cold. Snowflakes swirled around him, catching in the folds of his winter camouflage. He lay prone on the ridge, eyes scanning the landscape through the high-powered lens. Nothing moved. Only silence, vast and absolute. He exhaled slowly, watching his breath dissipate in the frigid air. His comm unit crackled, breaking the quiet. "Carter, do you copy?" The voice of Lieutenant Harris was barely above a whisper. "Loud and clear," Alex murmured, his voice calm. "Any movement?" "Negative. It's too quiet." That was the problem. The enemy never allowed silence to linger. Ever since the first wave of alien incursions, humanity had learned that stillness meant something was coming. Alex had seen the aftermath of their attacks. Entire squads erased, bodies left frozen in grotesque contortions. Plasma burns, shredded armor, skulls caved in from weapons that left no ballistic trace. He had survived by being cautious, by listening to the silence. He adjusted his position, the rifle's barrel barely shifting as he refocused. The snow beneath him compacted with the subtle movement. Through the scope, his view remained the same. An abandoned supply convoy, vehicles half buried in the ice, their once shiny exteriors dulled by the elements. The mission was simple: overwatch. A scouting team would retrieve the remaining supplies, and he was to cover them from a distance. But something was wrong. A flicker in the periphery of his vision made his pulse quicken. He stilled, waiting, willing the landscape to betray its secrets. Then he saw it, just a shadow at first, shifting between the snow-covered wreckage. The scope sharpened his vision. Movement confirmed. 3 figures, humanoid but unmistakably alien. Their elongated limbs moved with unnatural fluidity, their bioluminescent eyes scanning the area. Their armor was sleek, built not for brute force but for speed and adaptation. Alex had tangled with their kind before. They were scouts. Recon. If they were here, it meant more were coming. His breathing slowed, training taking over. 1 shot, 1 kill. That was the doctrine. The rule he had lived by. His crosshairs locked onto the nearest target, an alien standing with its back partially turned. The creature tilted its head as if sensing something. He had seen them do this before, their perception eerily advanced. If he missed, they would scatter. If he hesitated, they might detect his position. Alex exhaled. He pulled the trigger. The rifle bucked against his shoulder, the suppressed shot muffled by the snow. The alien's head snapped forward, a fine mist of dark fluid spraying into the air before it collapsed soundlessly into the frost. The others reacted instantly. 1 dove behind the wreckage while the 3rd sprinted towards cover. They moved fast, too fast for most snipers to handle. But Alex had learned their rhythms. He anticipated their maneuvers. His reticle followed the second target, squeezing off a second round just as it reached the edge of the wreckage. The shot punched through its side, sending it sprawling into the snow. 2 down. The 3rd, however, had disappeared. Alex adjusted his scope, sweeping the terrain. His fingers tensed around the trigger, prepared to fire at the first sign of movement. The wind howled, shifting the snow in erratic bursts, making visibility even worse. Then he saw it. A glint of something unnatural against the white expanse. The surviving alien had vaulted onto a wrecked transport, using the vantage point to scan for him. Its armor shimmered, adapting to the surroundings, but not fast enough to fool his trained eye. Alex squeezed the trigger. The round hit home, shattering the creature's chest plate. It staggered, a guttural sound escaping its throat before it toppled backward. For a moment, silence returned. Alex remained still, rifle trained on the bodies, ensuring none of them stirred. 3 shots, 3 kills. He allowed himself a measured breath. The mission was still intact, but this confirmed his worst suspicion. They were scouting this area for a reason. The comm unit crackled again. "Carter, report." 3 hostiles down, he said. "Scouts. They were looking for something." Lieutenant Harris cursed under his breath. "We need to move fast. Hold position, But stay alert. If they sent scouts, there's more coming. Alex didn't need to be told twice. The aliens never sent just one team. The real battle was about to begin. The bodies in the snow had already begun to freeze, their dark blood crystallizing in the frigid air. Alex remained motionless, his eye pressed to the scope, scanning for movement. He knew better than to assume it was over. The scouts were dead, but scouts were never alone. They were the tip of the spear, the first ripple in the water before the tidal wave followed. His breath was steady, controlled, as he watched the abandoned convoy below. Nothing stirred. The wind howled through the wreckage, lifting loose snow into twisting spirals, obscuring his field of vision. He adjusted his grip on the rifle, fingers flexing against the cold metal. The tension was suffocating. Then he heard it. A low, vibrating hum, too deep to be the wind, too rhythmic to be a natural sound. It came from beyond the ridge, distant but approaching. His muscles coiled, instincts screaming at him to move. He shifted his scope towards the sound, scanning the horizon. A silhouette emerged from the snowstorm. Then another. And another. Dark figures, tall and imposing, their armor reflecting dim light in erratic patterns, making them seem like shifting specters against the ice. They moved with a deliberate slowness, confident, unhurried. They weren't scouts. These were soldiers. Alex exhaled through his nose. 3 against 1 had been manageable. A squad? A death sentence. His comm clicked. "Carter, do you see them?" "I see them. We count at least 6 on thermals, possibly more beyond the ridge. They're moving toward your position." He tightened his grip on the rifle. "I noticed. You need to exfil now." He adjusted his aim, tracking their movements. "Negative. If I move, they'll see me. If I stay, I can thin them out before they reach you." A pause. "Then, make it count." Alex didn't respond. He was already lining up his shot. The lead alien carried a weapon unlike the scouts, a long, jagged rifle with pulsing veins of energy running along its barrel. It moved with authority, directing the others with sharp gestures. He took the shot. The round struck center mass. The force knocked the alien back, but instead of collapsing like the scouts, it barely staggered. Its armor had absorbed the impact. A second later, it snapped its head toward him. It had seen him. The alien raised a clawed hand and let out a sharp, guttural sound. The others immediately broke into a sprint, moving with terrifying speed, plasma rifles raised. Alex fired again, adjusting his aim. This time, he went for the neck. The bullet tore through the thinner armor just beneath the helmet, and the leader crumpled. But the rest were still coming. He rolled away from his position just as the first plasma shots tore through the snow where he had been a second before. The ridge erupted in bursts of blue fire, melting ice and sending shards of rock into the air. He slid down the embankment, landing in a crouch behind a half-buried transport. His heartbeat hammered against his ribs. He ejected the spent cartridge, chambered another round, and peeked around the edge. 3 of them were closing in fast, the others fanning out to flank. They weren't just charging blindly, they were coordinating. Alex pivoted, sighted in, and fired. The bullet caught one in the leg, shattering its joint. It screeched, stumbling, but its comrades didn't stop. He had seconds, maybe less. He pushed off the ground, sprinting toward better cover. More plasma fire rained down, searing through metal and ice alike. A near miss burned across his shoulder, heat searing through his armor. He gritted his teeth, ignoring the pain. Diving behind another vehicle, he reached for his side pouch, pulling out a small cylindrical device. He twisted the top, activated the charge, and lobbed it over the wreckage. The grenade detonated midair, sending out a shockwave that sent 2 of the aliens sprawling. The third, however, was already leaping toward him. Alex barely had time to react. He twisted, bringing up his rifle just as the alien landed on top of him, claws swiping at his face. The impact knocked the weapon from his hands. Pain exploded across his ribs as the creature drove a knee into his side. Its mandibles clicked, its breath hot and rancid against his visor. He struggled against its grip, muscles straining as he reached for his knife. The alien hissed, raising a serrated blade of its own. Alex didn't hesitate. He yanked his knife from its sheath and drove it into the creature's exposed throat. The alien gurgled, its movements jerking, then slowing. Dark blood spattered across Alex's armor as he twisted the blade deeper, shoving the creature off him. It collapsed, twitching, before falling still. He pushed himself to his feet, gasping for breath. No time to recover. 2 more were still alive. His rifle was too far, so he grabbed the fallen alien's weapon instead. The grip was awkward, the weight unfamiliar, but a gun was a gun. He leveled it at the nearest enemy just as it recovered from the blast. He pulled the trigger. The plasma discharge tore through its chest, dropping it instantly. Only one left. It had seen what happened. It hesitated for just a moment, its head tilting as if reconsidering the fight. Alex adjusted his stance. Go ahead. Try me. The alien let out a guttural growl but took a cautious step back. Then another. And then it vanished into the storm. Alex exhaled, lowering the weapon slightly but not relaxing. It wasn't over. His comm crackled. Carter, do you copy? Still here. That was some damn fine shooting. We're sending a team to extract you now. He glanced back at the bodies, at the blood seeping into the snow, at the dark trail leading into the storm. They're not done yet, he murmured. And neither was he. The storm thickened, swallowing the last traces of the retreating alien. Alex stayed crouched behind the wreckage, gripping the stolen weapon tightly. The heat from the plasma rifle hummed against his fingers, a stark contrast to the numbing cold pressing in from all sides. His breath came in short bursts, each exhale a cloud of vapor that disappeared into the white void around him. He had survived the ambush, but the battle wasn't over. It never was. His comm unit crackled again. Carter, we lost visual on your position. You need to confirm status. He tapped the side of his helmet. Still breathing. His voice was steady, but the tightness in his chest told a different story. Good. Extraction teams en route. Sit tight. That was easier said than done. He glanced toward the ridge where he'd made his stand, where the first bodies lay stiff and frozen. The mission had been simple, overwatch for a supply retrieval. Now it was something else. The aliens hadn't just been passing through. They had been looking for something. And he needed to know what. His eyes drifted to the leader he had killed, the first shot that had shattered their formation. The alien's armor, different from the rest, still flickered with residual energy, a soft bioluminescent glow pulsing beneath the cracks where his bullet had torn through. Slowly, Alex approached the body. Up close, the alien seemed less monstrous and more deliberate. Their kind had always been a mystery. Aggressive, yes, but not mindless. They weren't raiders or conquerors in the traditional sense. They operated with precision, with purpose. And that purpose had led them here. Kneeling beside the corpse, he reached for the alien's chest plate. The material was sleek but firm, like reinforced ceramic. A thin, blinking device was embedded just below the collarbone. A tracker? A transmitter? Carefully, he pried it loose. The moment it detached, the blinking stopped. Alex frowned. That wasn't standard tech for their kind. He turned the device over in his hand. The inscriptions on it weren't alien. They were human. His pulse spiked. This didn't make sense. He ran his gloved thumb over the engraved letters, partially obscured by the frost. A designation number. A military code. His own side's technology. His comm clicked again. Carter, how copy? He hesitated. Still here. Extraction team is 10 minutes out. Understood. His voice was quieter now, his thoughts racing. This wasn't just an incursion. This wasn't a simple alien raid. Human technology implanted in an enemy leader? That meant only one thing. Someone on his side had been involved in whatever the hell was happening here. And they hadn't told him. He looked back at the convoy wreckage. If the aliens had been searching for this tech, then maybe they weren't hunting humans. Maybe they had been trying to recover something stolen from them. Movement flickered at the edge of his vision. Alex spun, raising the plasma rifle. But it wasn't an enemy. It was the wounded alien. The one that had fled. It stood a dozen meters away, partially obscured by the swirling snow, its posture no longer predatory but defensive. Blood leaked from its wounded leg, staining the ice beneath it. It wasn't holding a weapon. It wasn't trying to run. It was just watching him. His instincts screamed to finish the job. A clean shot, an easy end to a loose thread. But he didn't fire. Instead, he raised the device in his hand, showing it to the alien. "This what you were after?" The creature's gaze flickered between him and the small piece of stolen tech. Its bioluminescent eyes narrowed. Then it did something he hadn't expected. It spoke. The voice was guttural, distorted, the pronunciation awkward. But the meaning was clear. "Stolen from us." The words sent a chill through Alex that had nothing to do with the cold. He had heard their kind make sounds before, war cries and guttural hisses. But this was different. This was communication. Understanding. He tightened his grip on the device. If what it was saying was true, then humans hadn't just been fighting a war of survival. They had been playing a deeper game, one he hadn't been told about. The alien took a slow step forward, then another. It wasn't attacking. It was waiting. Alex's training screamed at him to put it down. But the part of him that had survived all these battles, the part of him that had questioned why this war never seemed to end, told him something else. They weren't the monsters here. He exhaled, lowering the rifle just slightly. "What does it do?" The alien's eyes flickered again. "Call others. A distress beacon. A signal to their kind." Alex turned the device over once more. If this thing activated, the war might escalate beyond anything humanity could handle. More ships. More soldiers. More death. And yet, if he destroyed it, he'd be killing the only proof that humans might not be the victims in this fight. That they had taken something that didn't belong to them. The sound of approaching engines rumbled in the distance. The extraction team. He looked at the alien again. It hadn't moved. It was still watching him, still waiting. A choice hung in the frozen air between them. And Alex wasn't sure which side he was on anymore. The engines roared closer, their deep rumble vibrating through the frozen ground. Alex tightened his grip on the device, his pulse hammering against his ribs. The extraction team was almost here. Within minutes, heavily armed soldiers would fan out across the battlefield, securing the area, recovering what was left of the supply convoy, and questioning why their sniper hadn't finished off the last remaining enemy. The alien still stood motionless, blood darkening the snow beneath its wounded leg. Its breath came slow, labored, but its glowing eyes never left him. It was waiting, just as he was. Alex had spent years fighting them, years watching his comrades die at their hands. He had never hesitated before, never stopped to wonder what drove them. But now, holding this stolen piece of technology, he was staring into something that went beyond war. This wasn't just another battle. This wasn't just another mission. The device in his hand, marked with human codes, embedded in the alien leader's armor, was evidence of something deeper. Something hidden. A war behind the war. His comm crackled again. "Carter, extraction in 60 seconds. Sit rep." His mind raced. If he reported the device, command would confiscate it. It would disappear into classified vaults, buried beneath layers of deception. If he handed it over, he might never learn the truth. He glanced at the alien. It was still watching him. Expectant. He had a choice. With a sharp inhale, he made it. His fingers tightened around the device. Then, in one swift motion, he flicked his wrist and sent it sailing through the air. It landed in the snow at the alien's feet, barely making a sound. The creature stiffened. A second passed. Then another. Slowly, it reached down, clawed fingers closing around the device. Its bioluminescent eyes flickered once, recognition, maybe even gratitude, before it turned. Without a word, it limped into the storm, vanishing into the white abyss. Alex exhaled, the tension in his chest easing just slightly. He had no idea what he had just set into motion. The extraction team's dropship descended with a gust of wind, kicking up snow in a blinding flurry. Soldiers disembarked quickly, their weapons raised, scanning the area. A lieutenant approached him, visor glinting beneath the ship's floodlights. "Carter, status?" Alex straightened. "Engaged enemy scouts. Took out a larger force. One survivor escaped into the storm." The officer frowned. "You let it go?" He hesitated, then nodded. "Low on ammo. Wounded." It wasn't a threat anymore. The lieutenant studied him for a moment, then glanced at the bodies strewn across the battlefield. "Hell of a fight." "Yeah," Alex said quietly, glancing toward the storm where the alien had disappeared. "Hell of a fight." The lieutenant gave a nod. "Mount up. Command's gonna want a full debrief." Alex climbed aboard the dropship, settling into his seat as the ramp closed behind him. The hum of the engines vibrated through the hull as they lifted off, the battlefield shrinking beneath them. He stared at the frost-covered ground below, at the dark stains in the snow, at the wreckage of yet another skirmish in a war that had no end. For the first time, he wondered if he had been fighting on the wrong side.